Hello, bookworms. Welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we get to know interesting people by asking them about their favorite books. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and today we're talking comic books. Frank Miller reinvented the Batman story with his now classic, The Dark Knight Returns, a furious saga where our tortured hero has to take on a new generation of villains 10 years after his retirement. Talking to me about this book today is Led Bradshaw, a Brooklyn-born graphic artist who is quickly making a name for himself as one of New York's up-and-coming Black comic book illustrators. As the creator of Jetpulse Comics, his flagship title, The New Adventures of Jake Jetpulse, is a comic book adventure story that was inspired by his son Jacob, who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 4. I have never read a superhero comic before, so I had no idea what to expect. And I'll tell you in advance, I really enjoyed it, and it was an absolute delight to talk to Led about why The Dark Knight Returns is the best book ever. Hi, Led. Welcome to the Best Book Ever podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You are the first person who has chosen a graphic novel, and I have been hoping someone would choose a graphic novel to talk to me about because I don't know anything about them. How did you become a comic book geek, as you describe it?
Wow. Let's see. Around like maybe 3.5 years old, I started drawing sometime around that time. I mean, I was just draw whatever I see, like doodles, things, and I would just sit there and, try to like copy anything that I saw or whatever cartoon that was on television that was, that was fun at the time, whether it was like, Tom and Jerry or whatever it was. So I would just sit there and just like, try to copy whatever I saw. And then, I was never really taught. It was actually, I knew that I was good at it when I had a kindergarten book report. And it was like Where the Wild Things Are. That was the book that I had to, that I did a book report on. And I remember getting an F on it. It was my very first F.
What?
Yeah, the teacher was like, you can't have your parents draw the pictures. And I sat there and I was telling my teachers, like, I drew that. And then I had to draw the thing over again so I get a better grade. But my dad always fueled my talent. He would just he would bring home like whatever, like he would stop off at a store or go for a walk in the neighborhood, pick up a couple of comic books. Here, read these. Here, tell me what you think about this. And they were like, Spider-Man, Batman comics, I would just come home with all these comic books and I would just look at the pictures and then I would, draw everything that I saw and I would try to imitate the poses and try to make my own little comic book panels on a piece of paper. And then I'd have my mom staple them together. And those would be like my first comic books when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I just kept collecting as I went along because I figured, like, wow, there's so much cool artwork. I might as well just, like learn it all. And that's how, that's how that started. And then when it became when I was about like junior high school age, I remember like eating as little as I could, like, during lunch, just so I could have like some change to go pick up a comic book on the way home. So the comic book stores were awesome. Those were like the places where you would find me and I would be there, like, going through the racks looking for whatever stories interested me. So at first I didn't know, like, I would just listen to the other kids, like what stories they liked, and I would pick those up. So whether it was like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever it was, I would just grab whatever I could and, really study it, look at all the artwork. Can I draw that? I think I could do that. And then I would just sit there at home and just draw. And my parents invested in a lot of paper and pencils.
What's the bigger attraction for you? Is it the picture or the words?
At first, it was the pictures. Mm-hmm. I think it was like, there was just the visuals. I was more interested in that in the beginning. So up until the time I was about maybe 14, 15 years old, I was solely interested in just the visuals, the artwork, the art style. How did they do this? And I was just more intrigued with that, and of course I was reading the comics. I liked the stories, but I was more interested in the art. And I remember like my dad bought me this book. It's called Stan Lee's How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way or something like that. And I thought this was awesome because it showed me a completely different technique than what I was doing on my own. And I was like, wow, I can draw things a lot faster. I could draw more people. I could do all sorts of things now. And I must have went through that book. I don't know how many, couple hundred times. You know, I mean, the pages started falling out. I had to ask for a new one. You know, I was going through that thing like, you know, I studied that book hard. I was just really just into like, well, how did they do that? How did they draw this? How did they draw from these angles? So there was a lot of different things that I didn't know, that like drawing from perspective, which of different views, a bird's eye view, a worm's eye view. And I'm like, really, these are things? And it just created such a dynamic feel to the pictures by doing that. And it's like, I need to know how to do this because that was my dream. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to draw. When I was a kid, I always wanted to draw Saturday morning cartoons. You know, I wanted to draw like comic books or Saturday morning cartoons, whatever it was. If it was art related, I wanted to do it. So I wanted to learn as much as I could. So it was just all about the pictures at that point.
And you went on to become a graphic artist and the author of your own comic. Will you tell my listeners about that?
Well, I could say honestly, I'm the co-creator of this comic because the amazing part is that I'm doing the illustrating, and I always had an idea that I wanted to do my own comic book, but it came from my son Jake. So it was actually from his imagination, and the way how this all happened, it wasn't that I decided, hey, I'm going to make a comic book. That's what I'm going to do. It was, I guess when Jake was about 3.5 years old and he was diagnosed with autism, and like we knew that he needed some help in school, and we noticed that like his the teachers would sit down with me and tell me how like self-directed he was, and he was only interested in talking about superheroes, and he was always talking about either Batman or Spider-Man or Superman, but that pretty much dominated the conversation every day that he was in school. So he wasn't really grasping the work. He was more intrigued about talking about that. So I remember talking to a developmental pediatrician saying, and I remember she said that maybe instead of like discouraging him from talking about superheroes, why don't you like embrace it a little, you know, and see what you can get out of them. And I said, and I thought about that for a while. I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Started going on Google and searching for like different ways that I could help him out. You know, we'd already got him in touch with a few therapists and stuff that were helping him. And then I found art therapy exercises, and I was like, hey, I could do this, man. I've been drawing my whole life, and this is easy. And, you know, not to take away from anybody that's, you know, that does this for a living, like a licensed therapist or whatever. But because I was drawing so much, I'm like, maybe I can use some of this to help him out. And we found a few really cool exercises. One of them was to express his feelings using colors. Because he had a speech delay and his vocabulary was very limited, this was a way for me to help him understand his feelings so he wouldn't be so frustrated when it came to him communicating things, and I wouldn't have to worry about, you know. So I sat down with him, and then like I would mark on a piece of tape on the marker, and the red one I would put angry, and the yellow one I would put happy, and then the blue one I would put sad, and you know. And every day after school, I would like, Jake, well, how do you feel today? And he would pick his own marker, you know, and he would write, you know, write a box on the chart or whatever that I put on the refrigerator. And whatever color it was, I would ask him like, okay, so what made you mad today? What made you happy today? And that was his way of, that was our way of like expressing, you know, helping him express his feelings. So I saw this exercise was working. And I said, okay, cool. So why don't we try drawing like happy pictures or sad pictures using these same colors? So for angry pictures, use a lot of red, you know, use a lot of blue for your sad pictures. And I was doing all of this, and that seemed to work. I just don't know what I stepped in when I did this. It was just by pure luck. And then I said to myself, like, holy cow, this was like one day I'm sitting there and I grab a beer out of the fridge. It's hot, it's summertime. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what if I like simplified the whole process of building a comic book into like a learning lesson and see if he picks it up. I said, okay, Jake, what I want you to do is it's like, I'm going to draw a face. You tell me, like, is the person angry? Like, I would use the colors like blue or red or whatever. And he would tell me this person's happy, this person's sad. And I'm like, okay, he could understand, like, like the facial cues. And I made sure that he really understood like what was going on. The one exercise that really blew everything out of the water was, it was draw yourself as a superhero. And this is an exercise that was meant to bring out your self-esteem, your positive traits, the things that you like the most about yourself. And then he just took the ball and ran. The moment we sat down and started drawing it, he started creating this character called Ultra Jake. And he was like it was like, little refrigerator drawings. Look, Daddy, I did this for you, And it was like had the laser rays shooting out, and it's this character, and he's fighting to save the day. And I'm like, well, who are those other people in the picture? He's like, oh, those are my friends. And he like, this is Julia, and this one is like Mars. And at first, like the troll, Mars the troll, who was one of the heroes in the book now, started off as like a monster, like as a villain. So it was like, so yeah, they're after the evil trolls, and and they're gonna save New York. And I'm like, oh wow, that's great. But then I realized that he started doing it on his own. Like he would just sit at the table, grab paper, and he would just continue this whole Ultra Jake thing. Okay. And then I saw like he would ask my mom to staple the things just like how I used to do when I was a kid. And I would sit there and I look at him like, wow, really? Like the genes are really strong, aren't they? Because he's doing the same thing. So he's like, Daddy, I made you a comic book. Look. And I would see all these drawings. I'm like, wow, this is really awesome. So now he's, first, second grade now. And the teachers are like, yeah, he's still having problems grasping some of the material. He just rather talk about superheroes. And I took it upon myself. I started drawing him. I started drawing the characters like the way how I draw, and drawing it and drawing the hero in his likeness, so that when he looked at it, he recognized himself immediately. And when he needed help learning to read, I just made little flashcards out of all those pictures: run, jump, fly, drive. That's how I helped him how to read. I started like putting like the sentences together, like Jake can run fast, Jake can fly high. And then like as he was reading those on his own independently, one of the teachers said to me, she was like, wow, I mean, he just really picks his stuff up. He snuck the flashcards that I made for him. He brought them to school to show the teacher. And he's like, wow, do you have any more of these? I'm like, I guess I can make a few, right? So I said, why make flashcards? And like, it's probably easier just to make a book, right? So I made these little books. They were very tiny ones. And like, I passed them out. I gave them to Jake. I said, here's a few. So he comes home. I'm picking him up from school. And he's like, Daddy, guess what? I had a book signing today and I signed all the books.
Oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing.
And I was like, what did you do? He was like, yeah, I signed all the books like a superstar. I was like, really? And one of the parents came to me and was like, wow, I read this book to my kid every night. Do you have any more books? And then in my head, I'm like, dude, you're about to get yourself into some really big trouble here.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I think I'll make more. So now Jake is at a point where he's creating the characters. He's writing his own stories. He's taking after me. He's like, at first I was really into like the visuals, like the comics, the art style. But it wasn't until I was in high school that I got into like creative writing and found that I was really good at it. Mm-hmm. And I brought Jake along into the whole process, so I could show him how a comic book is made. He could see how I draw everything, and then he became like the art director to like, the whole process. So he would tell me all about the characters. I would just put the voice memo down on the table. I would tell, okay, tell me everything about these characters. Don't hold back. And I would just record hours of him explaining who each character was. And I would use that to draw and create whatever I thought they would look like based on what he said. We kind of follow each other's lead in that, I guess, because like some of the story comes from me too. It's a way for me to a way for the both of us to really exercise those geek muscles. I didn't realize it, but afterwards, like we had created a really cool, group of characters from like all the information that he had.
Don't you think it's incredible that the thing that you were obsessed with since you were 3, mm-hmm. that you think about all the time is your personal passion is the thing that unlocks your son and connects you guys. It kind of blows me away.
Yeah, if you had told me this like 30 years ago, I probably would have laughed at you. It's like I didn't even think anything of it, to be honest. And the fact that everything kind of like the stars align, if you want to call it like, some godlike intervention, I have no idea. But everything just seemed to just come full circle. Like the moment like I saw that he needed help, and I was like, okay, what's the best way for me to do it? And it's the one thing I've been doing every day of my life.
Right. Right. It's like he is exactly the right kid for you, and you're exactly the right dad for him. Exactly. It's just amazing.
Thank you.
God. Do you have to, or did your parents have to guard what you read? Because there were a couple of pages where I went, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, the more mature stuff you wouldn't see like a typical comic, like on the shelf. So graphic novels have a tendency to be a little bit more edgier.
Okay.
The overtones are a little bit more. But by the time I started reading that, I was already, I guess, a sophomore in high school. So smart enough to know the difference.
Yeah. I
understood that that given the character, the violence was necessary to move the story along. And that's the things that I was applying from my English teacher. By the time I got to this story, I think it was really intrigued because I was so used to the way how superhero stories were told. The good guys always win. The bad guys are always evil. But I think what it was that graphic novel really showed me a completely different dimension to like the whole superhero genre. The story is about an aging superhero, an older Batman who's retired. Like he can't give up. He can't retire. But, you're seeing it from like the perspective of sort of like how the real world would be if like how long of a career would they actually have, before they couldn't do it anymore. And then how the story, touches on trauma. It touches on so many different things and just like the violence. So I think that's what it was that really pulled me in. And like, because you saw like there was a completely fragile, different side of like the superhero that we've grown up knowing. So that really is what like made me want to write more. I can write a superhero story about anything I want, and I started taking cues from my English literature teacher, and she was telling me like to draw from my own life. To carry a journal, to write things down, like even when they're really bad, even when they're at your worst, and you really don't have the heart to write anything. Just write down how you felt at that moment, because later on you'll revisit it when you're, when you're stronger, when you're better, you can revisit it. And that's when I started like really writing like those scenes and like, in my head, like this whole taking like Jake's universe later on in life and then creating a story around it, or being able like to weave it like its own unique story that's separate from other superheroes. There's certain tropes, certain things that like that are common for superheroes. Like some of them are orphans, some of them become superheroes because there was a defining traumatic moment in their life, and this is their way of coping. Their way of moving past it, I guess. I wanted to create a superhero that had a family, like that's growing up, that's having friends, that's doing things. And I draw from all those other books, especially that one, because it gives me an idea like there's nothing wrong with exposing yourself and showing that human side of a character, because that's what makes them relatable. And I think that's what it was.
I mean, that's the thing of Batman, right? That he's got this absolutely tragic origin story. And what I wanted to ask you is there such a thing as a superhero book? In my limited knowledge, I couldn't think of a superhero who doesn't have a terrible backstory.
They're rare, I mean, Wonder Woman.
Oh, yeah. Oh, duh, of course.
Comes from an island of like, of Amazons and stuff.
So this book, The Dark Knight Returns, is this what the Christian Bale movies are based on? Is it the stories in this volume?
I will tell you that there's a handful of Batman movies that used that as some kind of inspiration. The best way I could say it is that like that book really changed the course of how the character is perceived. I mean, it really like laid a certain foundation down for everyone who's making like a Batman movie, or any superhero movie, as a matter of fact, because now they're a little bit more darker and like their tone is a little bit more. And it all comes from these graphic novels. Like it really shaped the way how superheroes are viewed in modern pop culture now. And like we're seeing more. It's become normal to see characters that are more relatable, that have more dimensions to them. It took me a while to get used to seeing like a Superman that like people didn't trust. But then I thought about it. I was like, that's a good point. I mean, if there really was a super being on this planet that could fly, that can lift anything you wanted, that had like, X-ray vision and all this other stuff, I mean, that would probably be the most frightening thing ever.
We'd lock him up.
Right. It would be scary. It's like, so it's like it makes for a great story when you add that dynamic in there. So like The Dark Knight really changes that, having an older Batman in that story. We've all known the character to rely on his wits and, to rely on like, on his brains. He's like a detective. And that's what we know him as. But now that he's a little older, he's still trying to use like the brute force to accommodate for certain things that he's lacking. And you see him, he's a little bit more brutal now because he's a little older. He can't rely on he's not as fast as he used to be. It really puts him at risk. At some point, he gets hurt. It's not what they call canon. Like this is like an alternate reality, but there's so many cool things about about that story that actually found its way into the mainstream comic storyline because it was just so good. That is like the building block. That's the foundation of everything that we know about this character. Like started from that book.
Now, I'm always interested to ask comic readers what they think of the film translations, but I'm especially interested to ask you as an artist, and because the visuals are so important to you just as a person, this is what you do. So what are your thoughts on the translations of these stories that you grew up with into a visual medium? Have you been generally happy, or have there been some that did it right and some that didn't?
Oh boy. Okay. Wow. I've actually created some colorful 4-letter words at some of these movies. I've learned to actually as a creator now to actually appreciate the artist's interpretation. But then when something sucks, it really sucks badly.
Is it true that the Batman that you first discovered will always be your Batman? I have heard that before. For me, it's true because I'm 52 and my Batman is Adam West forever. And I understand it has nothing to do with this Batman.
Yeah. I used to run around the house with a towel around my, I would pretend I was walking up the walls, all sorts of crazy stuff. And that was another influence of mine, when it really came to to putting Jake Jetpulse together, because I wanted the panels bright because I'm making it for kids. I wanted it to be fun. I wanted to put the power back into their hands. Comics don't always have to follow the mold of being gritty and dark. And I wanted something fun and enjoyable so the kids can read. And I like that. That's the first place I got it, because there's nothing more ridiculous than watching Adam West slide down a pole.
Okay, so then who is your ultimate Batman? Who do you think does it best?
I would say that the Christian Bale was actually like one of my favorites. I think he encompassed the complexity of the character really well.
What's your goal for Jake Jetpulse?
World domination.
Yeah, well, obviously,
world domination.
You're on your way.
Yeah,
Do you envision him getting old and having a cane in the stories, or do you want to kind of lock him into he's always going to be this sort of kid superhero?
Well, I have been chronologically aging him to keep up with Jake's actual age, because I started when he was about 4. So, I would love my future intention. I have a whole bunch of them. I have my 3-year list and I have my 5-year list. In my 3-year list, I would love to see Jake Jetpulse comic books like on the shelves in multiple places. I mean, I would really love to see kids enjoying these, and I'd love to see parents enjoying them because having an autistic superhero really like adds completely different dimension, especially one who's an Afro Latino superhero with autism. So we're tackling diversity in that sense, and at the same time, it's like this. It's him. It's not like we're creating this just like the check the boxes.
Yeah.
But it's we actually created a character that we felt, Jake and I, that we felt that could stand alongside Batman and Superman and the Justice League or whoever or any of the Marvel characters. We wanted to create like a character that was strong enough to do that. We wanted to create a character who was a kid. We wanted the characters to get behind them. They're learning their powers as they go along. The one of the messages that I wanted to that I wanted to share with you too is that these characters are basically the three hallmarks of autism split into the multiple the heroes. So as I mentioned, Julia, the character, is like Asperger's or autism spectrum disorder as it's being called.
Okay.
As the Mars the troll, who is the takes everything like in the literal sense. It's like he doesn't understand like jokes. Sometimes they fly over his head. So you have Jake, who's like very impulsive. He wants to be the hero. He wants to be like like it's his goal like to basically live up to his to his hero's level and stuff. And then we have the Shrive, who's like a ghost. He's nonverbal. He doesn't speak. And then we have the Miranda, the redhead, who's basically a telepath. She can hear the Shrive's thoughts. So so they're all they're all different components of what autism is. So I wanted to show that when separate, they're all like individually they're all like super cool, but when they're together, they can do amazing things together. Because we never spell out in the storyline that they're autistic. So it's in their personality traits as you read the story that you'll find similarities to what either like a child or their sibling or like another friend or family member. Like, oh, that's why they don't look in the eye. That's why like he has trouble with loud noises. That's why. So all of these things are incorporated into the characters, and it just makes it even more like unique for us. It makes the characters much more relatable.
I love that. That is so cool.
Thank you. Because I always felt that everyone has their hero's journey. There's a story that's that's within everyone that's waiting to be told. It's just a matter of how do you get it out. I guess that's what I feel like comic books did for me. And even though that story, the Dark Knight Returns, the way how it is, it taught me a lot. It really did. It actually, as crazy as that book is,
yeah.
But it taught me about like trauma, about like letting go, about like moving on, about those were some of the things that really stuck with me, especially like as I got older. I realized that like there were certain things I had to let go of before I could actually feel confident to do what it is that I'm doing now. In a way, how like Batman reinvents himself at the end of the book is the same way how I did myself. So I had to let that chapter of me be told and then move on to something else.
What graphic artists or comic book artists are you following these days?
I've always been a fan. Like some of them are like old school. I mean, a lot of them, those were my heroes, my childhood heroes. So I'm always going to mention them. And maybe like I mean, there's like George Perez, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Ryan Bolan, Alex Ross, phenomenal. His work are more like portraits. His art style is more like photorealistic, but it really embodies like that golden age era like look to it, where the characters are very square jawed and squinty eyed, but like very realistic take on the characters. And you'll look at it and you'll think you're looking at a photograph, and it's like his artwork is so fantastic. Alex Ross is amazing.
This has been so great. Will you tell my listeners where they can find you and all the great work you do?
Yes. You can check out our website, the Jake Jetpulse website, which is www.jakejetpulse.com. That's JakeJetpulse.com. Spelling bee champ. You can also find me on Instagram. On Instagram, Jake Jetpulse is the handle, all one word, or the Jetpulse_comics on Twitter. Is there any other handle that I'm leaving out? Oh, we've also started a TikTok channel as well. So
Perfect.
it's just following the adventures of Jake and I as we were like, going about our father and son things and me beating him sadly at video games. So he has to learn that the old man still got it.
Yeah,
so
that's right. Len, this has been so fun. I want to thank you for letting me take up so much of your time and for introducing me to this book, which I just knew nothing about. And I just really am so glad I read it. It's just been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate you having me on. And it was really like, I've been looking forward to this to the point where like I had about like 3 mugs of this right now. And it's like, black coffee. So like after this, I'm probably going to take like a quick jog around the entire neighborhood.
Right. Bookworms, I can't wait to hear what you think of this episode. Are you a comic or graphic novel fan? I would love to hear about your favorites and what you think I should read next. Let me know on Instagram at Best Book Ever Podcast. Remember, you can find links to all the books we discussed in the show notes or at my website, bestbookeverpodcast.com. And if you have a book you want to tell me about, click on the Be a Guest button on my website or Instagram bio so we can chat. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you at the library.
Don't get me started on my Back to the Future theory. I will blow your mind. Like, seriously, like smoke will come out of your ears. Like, I have a whole theory about that.
We're going to do a second episode about that then. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm telling you,
Back to the Future episode.
Yeah, I'm just warning to any Back to the Future fan that's listening. I mean, like, whatever it is that, like, you think that you know about that movie, like, I'm just going to just completely, yeah.
Oh,
that was
I
bad.
can't wait to hear this.